Imagine waking up, checking the real estate market in your local mountain town and, realizing the median price of a single family home just jumped by over $1 million.
Right, in just 12 short months.
Exactly. I mean, in almost any other scenario, you look at that number and immediately scream boom or bubble, right?
Absolutely.
But in Mammoth Lakes, California right now, that massive, eye-popping $1 million leap is, well, it's actually just a mathematical illusion.
Yeah, it really is. It's a perfect example of why you can never, ever just read the headline of a market report.
Totally.
If you actually dig into the mechanics of what's happening, you realize that an extreme price jump in a very specific segment, it doesn't signal a frenzy at all.
No, not at all.
In fact, it kind of masks a market that is deeply engaged in settling down.
Exactly. We are looking at a highly detailed real estate market update for Mammoth Lakes. This is from May 2026. And the data inside paints a picture that is entirely different from the wild, adrenaline-fueled, like, sight-unseen bidding wars we all remember from a few years ago.
Thank goodness.
Right. So the mission for our deep dive today is to explore the overarching theme of this report. We want to know, what does a truly balanced, more selective, and resilient real estate market actually look like in practice for you?
Yeah, and the core concept we really need to establish for you right from the start is that 2025 marked a definitive return to normalized conditions in this region.
Right, the dust finally settled.
Exactly. And the first 4 months of 2026 haven't just continued that normalization, they have, like, structurally cemented it. The leverage has shifted.
Whoa.
Buyers are taking their time, they are breathing, and the days of guaranteed success for a seller just because they happen to, own property in a zip code of the ski resort, those days are officially behind us.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to truly understand what this new era of balance looks like, we have to recognize that looking at a town-wide average is completely useless right now.
Oh, totally useless. It tells you nothing.
Right. The data forces us to split this market in two. Because if you are out there looking to buy a condo in Mammoth Lakes today, your reality is wildly different from someone trying to buy a single-family home.
It's night and day.
It is quite literally a tale of two entirely different markets operating at two completely different speeds.
It really is. And the disparity in volume is what drives that difference. Let's start with the condo market.
Okay, let's do it.
The report clearly identifies this as the primary active segment of Mammoth Lakes real estate. As of May 1st, 2026, there were 95 active condo listings sitting on the market.
Which is a decent chunk of inventory.
Yeah, it's solid. And we are seeing a steady, reliable pace of about 19 condo sales per month. Now, that total volume of money changing hands is around $16.3 million a month.
Okay.
It is important to note that this is down from the $26 million per month peak we saw in 2025. But 19 sales a month still provides a very solid, predictable baseline of transaction activity.
Right. The condo market has enough churn to give us reliable data. But then you look at the single-family home market, we are talking about a microscopic fraction of the inventory by comparison.
Tiny.
Just tiny. There are only 20 active listings for single-family homes in the entire town. They are averaging just about 5 sales a month with a total volume of like $12.3 million per month.
Right.
So you have 95 condos sitting there and only 20 houses.
And that extreme scarcity fundamentally rewrites the rules for that specific segment. When you have low volume, you inevitably have high volatility.
Which brings us back to that staggering statistic I mentioned at the very beginning. The median sale price for a single-family home in April 2026 hit $2,375,000.
Huge number.
It's massive. But in 2025, that median was sitting at $1,300,000. So I have to challenge the overarching premise here.
Go for it.
If this report is telling us we are in a balanced, normalizing market, how on earth does a median price almost double in a single year? It feels inherently contradictory.
It does sound like a contradiction, yeah.
Like, is this market actually skyrocketing, or is there a mechanical reason for this massive leap?
It is so tempting to look at that jump and assume the market is on fire again. But if you look closely at the mechanics of a low-volume luxury market, the story completely flips.
How so?
Because you are only looking at roughly 5 single-family home sales a month, all it takes is 1 or 2 massive legacy properties selling in the $3 or $4 million range to violently drag that median price upward.
No, okay.
It's statistical noise. It does not mean a standard 3-bedroom cabin built in the 1980s suddenly doubled its equity over the winter.
So it's essentially a quirk of the math, like a small sample size in a science experiment. One giant luxury whale heavily skews a tiny sample size of 5 houses.
Exactly. The report explicitly states that the single-family home segment remains heavily influenced by a small number of higher-priced
Oh,
sales.
wait, that makes sense.
You contrast that with a condo market, where you have that larger sample size of 19 sales a month, smoothing out all those anomalies. The median sale price for a condo year-to-date in 2026 is $739,000.
Okay. And if you look at 2025, it was tracking the exact same trend. The condo median hasn't violently jumped, it's stable. And because of that volume, the condo market is a much more accurate reflection of the true underlying baseline of Mammoth real estate.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
So we have these two varying market speeds. You've got the steady, reliable condos versus the scarce, volatile single-family homes.
Right.
Let's shift our focus to the concept of leverage. Because if you were the one signing the contract, you really want to know who actually holds the power in a negotiation right now.
Absolutely.
If condos are moving steadily and houses are scarce, who dictates the terms? The report suggests that the answer lies entirely in how long these properties sit empty, using a metric called months of supply.
Yes, and months of supply is the ultimate barometer for leverage. For you listening, if we're talking about inventory, let's ditch the old real estate cliches and think of it like the line at the main ski gondola on a Saturday morning.
Oh, I like this. If the mountain suddenly stopped letting anyone new into the lift line, meaning no new property listings hit the market, months of supply is exactly how long it takes for the current line to completely clear out, assuming the gondola keeps loading people at its current speed.
I love that visual. It makes it so clear. So how long are we waiting in this line?
Generally, a 0 to 4 month supply is a seller's market. The line is short, demand is high, and sellers dictate the terms.
Got it.
A 5 to 6 month supply is a balanced market, so it's an even playing field. Anything 7 months or higher shifts into a buyer's market. That means inventory is piling up, the line is getting unmanageably long, and buyers can demand steep concessions because sellers are desperate to get on the lift.
Okay, so applying that metric to the Mammoth data. Overall, single-family homes have a 4-month supply. That means the line is still a bit tight.
Yeah, slightly.
Because of that absolute scarcity of only 20 listings, it still leans slightly toward the seller. Condos overall have a 5-month supply. That is the very definition of a perfectly balanced market.
On a macro level, yes. The town looks incredibly healthy. The overarching numbers indicate a beautifully functioning equilibrium.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because when the report breaks down that condo supply by specific price brackets, the data reveals a massive localized black hole.
Oh yeah, it does?
While the overall condo market is balanced at 5 months, the $1 million to $1.5 million condo segment has a staggering 13-month supply.
That is a structural logjam.
It's crazy. So what's happening there? A 13-month supply is a massive outlier. Have people with $1.5 million just decided they don't like mountain towns anymore?
Hardly. What's fascinating here is what that specific 13-month number actually means for your strategy if you were house hunting tomorrow.
Right. What does it mean practically?
It means that in that specific price bracket, properties are just sitting there accumulating days on market and completely stagnating. Practically speaking, it hands the buyer absolute undeniable power. If you are shopping for a condo between $1 and $1.5 million, you have the leverage to take your time, demand extensive repairs, aggressively negotiate the price down, and comfortably walk away if the seller pushes back.
Yeah.
Because there are a dozen other sellers in that exact same bracket desperate for your attention.
And we are really seeing that newly discovered buyer leverage play out in the final sale prices across the board. The report notes that generally, properties are selling 3% to 5% below their original list price.
Yeah, they are.
Sellers are being forced to come down to meet reality. And the days on market, like how long a property sits waiting for a buyer, really highlights this new era of extreme patience. Closed single-family homes are sitting for an average of 100 days.
That's a long time.
It is. That is up from 87 days in 2025.
Interestingly, though, closed condos are selling slightly faster than they were. They are sitting for an average of 62 days, which is down from 74 days in 2025.
But let's pause on that. 62 days is still 2 full months. That 62-day timeline isn't just buyers dragging their feet or, casually browsing Zillow on the weekends.
No, definitely not.
That is a highly active 2 months. It is exactly the amount of time it takes to execute a massive, complex amount of due diligence. Which brings us to the hidden icebergs of this market.
The fun stuff.
Right. Why is that specific $1 million to $1.5 million condo bracket piling up with a 13-month supply? When you read the details of this report, you realize the hesitation has very little to do with the initial sticker price of the property.
Right.
The paralysis is driven entirely by the hidden, recurring, and escalating costs of mountain living.
This gets to the absolute heart of what buyers are actually evaluating in 2026. The report places a massive, undeniable emphasis on homeowners associations.
The dreaded HOA.
Exactly. We all know that HOAs are a reality of condo ownership. But in a mountain town like Mammoth Lakes, aggressive, increasing HOA dues and massive special assessments are no longer the exception. They have become the fundamental operating reality.
And we aren't just talking about a special assessment to put a fresh coat of paint in the lobby or like plant some new shrubs.
Not at all. We are talking about critical structural survival. You have to remember the context of the built environment here. Many of these complexes were built in the 70s and 80s.
Right, they're getting old.
Very old.
Yeah.
Their infrastructure has been battered by decades of intense alpine winters. The report notes that these assessments are frequently funding major exterior lifelines, replacing entire aging siding systems, putting on brand new roofs, overhauling structural supports.
Wow.
When a building's envelope reaches the end of its functional life, the bill comes due all at once, and those fixes require millions of dollars.
But there's another much more volatile mechanism driving these HOA costs upward, and the report explicitly cites it as one of the biggest single hurdles for getting a real estate transaction across the finish line right now.
Oh, yeah.
It's the insurance crisis. Mountain property insurance has fundamentally changed the financial viability of these properties.
It has rewritten the math entirely. The insurance landscape has contracted so much. When an HOA goes to renew its master insurance policy for the entire building complex, they're facing a completely different reality than they were 5 years ago.
How so?
Because of the escalating mapping of wildfire risk, combined with massive snow load liabilities from historic winter seasons, insurance carriers have either pulled out entirely or dramatically increased their premiums.
And the HOA has to pay that.
Right. The HOA has no magic fund to absorb that. They have no choice but to pass that exponential premium increase directly onto the individual condo owners through permanently higher monthly dues or a sudden, crippling special assessment.
So if you are a buyer, you have to look at this landscape and ask yourself a really pointed, almost uncomfortable question. When you buy a condo and you start digging into those HOA financials, are you essentially just buying the building's underlying insurance and maintenance liabilities?
That is precisely what you are doing. You cannot view a condo as just the square footage inside your unit walls anymore. When you close on that property, you are buying a fractional share of that building's long-term financial health and its risk profile.
And that mechanism right there completely explains the 13-month logjam. The source aggressively advises that buyers must now act like forensic accountants.
Yes, forensic accountants. I love that term.
You can't just walk into a unit, fall in love with the vaulted ceilings and the stone fireplace, and just make an offer. You have to demand the HOA's reserve study.
Absolutely.
You have to look at their balance sheet and ask, when was this roof last replaced? Has the master fire insurance policy actually been secured for next year, or is the carrier dropping the building? Are there any pending lawsuits?
All of the above.
Buyers are taking 60 to 100 days to close because they are auditing the true total cost of ownership.
Exactly. And when you connect that forensic accounting back to that 13-month supply of condos in the $1 million to $1.5 million range, the mystery completely dissolves.
How does it fit together?
That specific price bracket often represents the older, larger units in town. A buyer might go to their lender and easily qualify for a $1.2 million mortgage based on their income.
Okay, so they have the loan.
Right. But when they act like that forensic accountant and they uncover that the HOA dues are $1,500 a month and the reserve study shows a looming $40,000 special assessment for a new roof.
Oh, wow.
Suddenly, their debt-to-income ratio blows up at the underwriting desk. The math structurally fails, so they terminate the contract, they walk away, and that inventory just continues to pile up.
It's a totally different psychological game. Buyers are actively stress testing the balance sheets of these buildings. So with high prices, properties lingering on the market, and these deeply complex HOA and insurance risks, how does a listener actually navigate this mathematically?
Strategy is everything right now.
Right. What is the prevailing strategy in 2026, especially when we factor in the current cost of borrowing money?
To map out the strategy, we have to look at the exact rate reality the report provides for May 2026. The prevailing conforming rate for a 30-year fixed mortgage is sitting at 6.65%.
Okay.
And if you're looking at a jumbo mortgage, it's at 6.77%.
Okay, so just to frame that, we are definitely not back to the incredibly cheap 3% pandemic era rates, but we also aren't sitting at those terrifying 8% peaks that froze the market completely.
Precisely. What those mid 6% rates represent is stabilization. And stabilization completely changes the psychological mechanism of a buyer.
How so?
Think back to the rate hike cycle. Buyers were operating entirely on fear. They felt like if they didn't lock in a rate today, it would be a full percentage point higher next month. It forced irrational rush decisions.
Right, the panic buying.
Exactly. That panic has evaporated. Now, as the report astutely notes, affordability at 6.65% isn't amazing. It still heavily restricts purchasing power. But the predictability of that rate is incredibly valuable.
That makes a lot of sense.
It restores buyer confidence because they can actually sit down, build a spreadsheet, and plan their financial future without the ground shifting beneath them.
Predictability allows for strategy. When you aren't panic buying, you can actually negotiate. So let's distill the actionable takeaways for both sides of the transaction based on this data.
Let's do it.
For buyers, the message is incredibly clear. The leverage is yours. You have more options, you have the time to do your due diligence, and you have significantly increased negotiating power.
Especially on those older listings.
Exactly, especially on those stale listings that have been sitting on the market for 100 days. You do not have to waive your inspection contingencies to win a property anymore.
No way.
You can find a flaw in the roof or the heating system and demand that the seller cover the cost of the repairs before closing.
And for sellers, the playbook has to be completely rewritten. Success in 2026 requires hyper-realistic pricing from day one and flawless presentation. The report is very blunt in its assessment. Aspirational pricing will fail. If a seller looks at a neighbor's house that sold for an astronomical, completely irrational price at the absolute peak of the 2022 frenzy and says, well, my house is nicer, I want that price plus 10%, that property is going to sit empty.
Just collect dust.
It will accumulate days on market, the listing will become stale, and the seller will eventually be forced to do a humiliating price reduction just to get people back in the door.
The market simply will not tolerate delusion anymore. It actively punishes it.
The overarching takeaway is that the days of frantic, effortless wealth generation just by timing the market are over.
Yeah.
You can't just throw a listing on the MLS with a few poorly lit smartphone photos and expect multiple cash offers by Sunday evening.
Nope.
Success depends entirely on pricing accurately, preparing the property meticulously, and proactive coordination. And that coordination directly ties back to navigating those hidden icebergs we discussed.
The insurance and HOAs.
Right. If you are a seller, you have to secure that insurance plan before you even list the property. You have to front-load the solutions. You need to present a solved problem to the buyer, rather than handing them a looming liability that will cause them to walk away during escrow.
So to bring all of this together, we've journeyed through a fascinating evolution of a real estate market. We started by looking at raw transaction volume and peeling back the illusion of median price jumps.
The statistical noise.
Exactly. We've seen how the sheer scarcity of single-family homes contrasts with the steady, balanced inventory of condos. We've explored the leverage of the lift line, and we've unpacked why a 62-day closing period isn't a sign of laziness, but rather the exact amount of time required to forensically audit the complex liabilities of aging infrastructure and skyrocketing HOA costs.
It takes time to do the math.
It really does. What we are really looking at is a maturing, highly deliberate market. Balance reigns, and strategy absolutely trumps panic.
It's a market that demands respect for the underlying financial fundamentals. The lifestyle demand for Mammoth Lakes hasn't disappeared. People still desperately want access to the skiing, the trails, and the mountain air.
Of course they do.
But they are no longer willing to abandon basic financial common sense just to secure a piece of it. They are calculating the long-term cost.
So what does this all mean? Which brings me back to the very beginning of our conversation. We talked about how the old market frenzy was defined by buyers who just wanted the property no matter the cost and no matter the risk.
Right.
But looking at the intense, almost unavoidable emphasis the source places on the insurance crisis, the structural age of these buildings, and the rising operating costs of HOAs, I want to leave you with a final, slightly provocative thought to mull over.
Already.
If rising operating costs, massive reserve requirements, and the sheer availability of insurance continue to dictate HOA fees, and if those fees ultimately determine whether a property is mathematically viable for a buyer to purchase, We really have to wonder,
What?
are we approaching a future where the ultimate value of a mountain property is determined less by its beautiful, unobstructed view of the peaks and more by the fundamental insurability of its zip code?
That is a terrifying but very real question.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the numbers behind the headlines, keep looking for the hidden human behaviors driving the data, and we will catch you on the next one.